All right, hello everybody, and welcome to today's episode of Oracles of Theleston. Episode 11 here, we are continuing the skills and storytelling conversation from 2 weeks ago, from our last episode. And Zero, unfortunately, is not going to be able to stay for the whole show, so he's bowed out for this one. But we have Diggs here, we have Polaris here, and they were actually already talking. I think I had the audio open for a little, so you might have heard just a little bit of that before the show. But we were talking about a bit more about the interest and use of skills, and even how that would potentially apply with the Hopa. So I will just turn it back over to you two, so you can continue that conversation. That was quite interesting.
Well, it's kind of started because Polaris was saying that, she might not have as much to say because she's not so much wrapped up in the pen and paper, and she was mentioning the HOPA, and I was saying, but even when you're doing something like a HOPA that isn't so focused on players having skills, I'm hoping that the skill lists that we have will reflect the cultures in such a way that, if baking is a big part of that culture, that would be reflected in the environment of whatever area that we happen to be playing in, regardless of
Exactly.
whether, you know,
Right.
it's a combat, type of game or whatever. Even if you're just doing searching for things and looking for lore or looking for clues to things, those clues should be hopefully reflective of the skills, or the skills should be reflective of the world in such a way that they always kind of play in.
Yeah, that's kind of my approach as well, that no matter which distributable aspect of Theleston we're working towards. I mean, in this conversation, it's relevant to the PMP, but even in the other things that we're doing, I look at how the skill lists and the skill sets and the things that comprise how we put those together, including the weapons, the stances, the yada, 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 all blend to create the world. And then
Well,
everything that we do out of the Theleston product base is relevant and related to each other, and there's no gaping hole for some missing piece of whatever. And as you mentioned earlier, the lore is the other part of that glue.
yeah, I was thinking about the characters and the skills. For those who don't know, especially with Revival, that had me up to 21 or 22 all characters. One of them was going to be focused on is just a drunk, because there's like a drinking skill. So he's just the drunk. Maybe he has eavesdropping and listens in, and he's able to gossip, and like those are the basic three things that he does. He hangs out in the bar drunk, he eavesdrops on what other people are talking about, and he's able to give gossip, and that's pretty much that character. And I was wondering, related to the PNP, how reflective could that possibly be? And then that led me to thinking about what I called the stank attribute, which um, the NPCs in Revival were supposed to react to your hygiene. It's actually called a hygiene attribute. And I was wondering if that would still be reflective even in the PNP. Again, with regard to the NPCs, are there cultures where, it's very important to bathe there? Are there other cultures that don't care about that so much? And that reminded me of something that, just a tangent that came up. So I watched, this was years ago, Oprah and her friend Gail went to visit the set of this TV show where people were reenacting
Oh, I know where
the
this one's
times of the
going.
pilgrims. And so Gail and Oprah show up to get dressed up, and as they're walking towards the village, the people come out and they say, "Oh, we know you were coming. We could tell you were coming." And she was like, "What?" She said, "Oh, we could smell your soap."
I believe it.
Yeah, smell it
Because nobody
downwind.
here, yeah, nobody here has that, and we don't bathe like we used to. We don't have the availability of that, but we could smell your soap down the and then it also was mentioned in Westworld. I think it was Westworld when Logan and William first come in. I think William mentioned something like, do these people not bathe, or or we're like everybody stinks. It's like, well, you have to play the part, and playing the part sometimes means you gotta blend in with the people, and this is what they did. Um, and so I'm wondering, I wonder how stuff like that could be fit into, again, the lore of the world. So regardless of the mechanics, um, is there a district of Conqueror that is particularly stanky? I would expect Sky Pass to be more pristine than Conqueror might be. Um, in Falkirk, maybe they only bathe once a week or something. I just wonder about those cultural aspects of the different skills that I saw in Revival and attributes, and how they might apply now that we're just doing pen and paper.
Yeah, so thinking about that, cleanliness, I'm sure, is a thing, but how each culture perceives it and how much it actually impacts gameplay, I would say, is far more of a narrative sort of thing than a mechanical sort of thing. And by that I mean, you don't have a specific attribute that determines what you smell like, the tags on your stank, the radius of those stanks or whatever. It's not like that. It's more, if if you do smell and it's a culture that people don't like that in, well, you'll probably have known that going in, or maybe you had did a little perception check ahead of time, and decided, okay, let me see how I smell before I go into this place, because I don't want to try to impress the nobles smelling like a barnyard. So I can, and then with that, I can definitely see that being one of the reasons why you would try to get access to like an inn or a tavern or something, if they've got or not a tavern, an inn, or a what's the other one I'm thinking of? Different, more of a short-term residency sort of establishment where you would actually have facilities to clean yourself, so that way, and it might be the richer one in the higher end of town, so that might mean that you have to spend a little extra coin, before you'll actually be prepared and in a position to try to do something important and impressive with the local local leadership. Now, I'd imagine it'd be a little bit different in like a little dirt poor farm town where everybody stinks and things are done more communally. That, yeah, you could just walk in and people would probably be more considerate of your attire and how you present yourself and your customs than how you actually smell at that point.
Well, but if you come into town with zombie rot, and you don't bathe, then there should likely be a reaction to that, and that would be, an attribute that you increased because you were fighting zombies, and you can't just explode a bunch of zombies around you and then walk into town and expect people to, take your treasure. No, I'm not. It's like, clean up. I'm not touching that zombie rot.
Well, the other piece of that too is if you go to a place, you just wander into town, and the people there are, let's say, clean. So hygiene's a factor. As you walk in stinking, you immediately, your first impression that you've given the locals is sucky. I mean, they're not going to want to have anything to do with you
Well,
until you figure out that you need to bathe.
it also might
Yeah.
depend on how their commerce works. If they do a lot of trade, if they're more of a stop along the way rather than, its own isolated hub or somewhere that you trade out from, rather than go to for trade, then I could see it being, doesn't matter if they stink. Look at the clothes they're wearing. That person's business. Treat them with respect. versus it could also be, oh, well, we don't need your kind around here, and we certainly don't need your stink around here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but it depends on value. So maybe in Valor, where commerce might be more of a thing, maybe they don't care as long as you're doing business. And somewhere else, maybe it's the most important thing. So that,
Yeah.
I mean, that's what makes the whole concept cool. That's one of the things that I liked about how detailed the skills were for a revival. So I hope that we see something continue like that throughout the Theleston games, because
Hope so too. I was happy
really
to see it show up in Hero's Song.
Mhm.
The whole stank
Ah,
factor.
ooh. And
I mean, I don't necessarily
jewelry.
like the way
Did
that
it?
they've
Did anybody
implemented it, but
talk about
it's
the
there.
jewelry slots that we have in Hero Song that might be problematic?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we already talked about the genital piercing slots on a previous episode, nipples and genital piercing, and the idea of whether or not that sends the right message to youths who might be playing the game. Then again, it's not that violent. I suppose it could be played by people who are in their teens or whatever, and it's no big deal. But it just doesn't seem like the sort of game where I expect the young kids these days to mostly pick up and be like, yeah, rockin', this is like that Ultima Online game back in the day. That's I feel like it's really geared just mechanically for older audiences. And, to that same extent, I feel Telleston is as well. I feel like something like D&D or even White Wolf, it boils down things in a simple enough way that, what you're actually doing and what you're actually, trying to achieve is a lot more straightforward most of the time. And not necessarily sure there's a narrative to it, but the narrative isn't necessarily always the core driving factor unless you've got a really good DM running the campaign, DM or GM or whatever phrase you want to use for the game you're playing. But I feel like Telleston is definitely more for audiences that are a little bit more, a little older, a little more experienced, not looking for something where 90% of their time is spent in combat, but something where 90% of their time is spent trying to find their place in the world, not go crazy, and work towards some objective they may or may not know that they're actually working towards. Like that's in all the while, again, trying not to go crazy. That's I think a lot more what the I'd want to say maybe 20 plus audience, people that have already been doing pen and paper for a while, or just really like the Lovecraftian horror represented in a magical and interesting, fantastical world that we've got here with Theleston. Yeah. So getting back on the subject of hygiene and appearance and all of that sort of stuff, that might also be something that people who are well traveled might know a little bit better about. They might know, okay, there's this rest stop, maybe a quarter day's walk from the actual town, so they do actually dislike staying there, so you want to stop at that rest stop ahead of time. Whatever business you have there, plan to show up either a day in advance or be in the area early in the morning so you can go to the rest stop, clean up, and then be going through the doors by the end of the day. That's the sort of thing that I definitely would expect to see from people that are a little more well traveled, or alternatively, if it is an area where people use a lot of soaps and perfumes and that sort of stuff, or it's an area where people are just dumping poop out in the streets like Crown's Rock, just having heavy perfumes in your inventory and being ready to apply them vigorously before you go into one of these places might be all you need to pass on the stink factor. Though, if you're dirty, you're still dirty, and they might not like that very much. Or again, your attire might also be the thing. You could be, clean or dirty, stink or smelling real nice, but they see the type of fabric you're wearing, they see the patterns, they see where you're from. And it's like, there's no saving this guy. He's just a bum around here. We don't want him. And that's again something that somebody who's well traveled would know about. If you're going to an area where the attire you usually wear isn't necessarily acceptable, plan to get different attire. Again, that rest stop, I would imagine, would have options available for that. So, there's definitely aspects of hygiene, but I would imagine if you really take your time and effort, know what you're doing going into it, you can mitigate a lot of those things. Likewise, if it's an emergency situation, you might be able to pass by the fact that everybody's all stank and nasty because somebody's, bleeding and has a crushed leg or something and being dragged into town for triage. At that point, it's like, well, yeah, they're nasty, but they were out doing something, and probably be more interested in what that something actually was than, how much you particularly stink at that specific moment.
That's how the zombie rot starts. So, no, not coming into town.
Well, I mean, that's up to the person at the gates to say yay or nay on those people coming in, too.
Yeah. If there are gates.
If there are gates.
Yeah, so what I'd like to take like a culture and try and think about what they'd be into, what skills would be popular there.
Okay.
Like Falkirk, we know logging is popular, right? I think whaling is popular in Crowns Rock.
Crowns Rock. I could see that being a Valor thing too. A Tide's End. I wouldn't say necessarily Tide's End because I don't know how much whales go through the strait there. Tide's End is mostly focused on the strait and the trade in that area, so maybe not as many whales.
There was a very long pier out of Tide's End.
There is, but that is there?
Yeah, I think so.
Let's see. Something to the scent of pine in Fall Creek. Yeah. I see what you're saying. Not scent, like the smell.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, let me actually bring up the skill sheet itself here, and we can kind of look it over while we talk about it here. So I'm going to slide it over to the right. Did we actually have listings for cultures? They gave us divine spheres and potential gods that things might be associated with, but not specific cultures. So thinking about the Fall Creek area and who the Falkirk are, I would imagine, they have axes. They chop down a lot of wood and work with a lot of wood. So I would imagine there's a lot of people that are proficient in using axes as weapons for self-defense, or potentially they have a small militia or guard or whatever that would be using either axes, or I could even see polearms like halberds kind of being in the mix at that point, though. That in Falkirk, it seems like Fall Creek rather, and not specifically the Falkirk culture, but just Fall Creek itself, it doesn't seem like polearms would really be a practical thing that the everyday person would have. It really does seem like it would be either a symbol of status or a very specific weapon that's assigned to guards that are meant to be able to hold back crowds or, fend off large beasts. But otherwise, we did talk about it a bit. They do have some swords. They're very uncommon. So you wouldn't really see a lot of people. You probably wouldn't roll a character that has sword skills unless you were able to, get training or whatever, and you're using wooden swords to train throughout your childhood. You probably wouldn't actually have a metal sword to do that with from that area.
Well, or if you wanted to be a swordsmith,
a swordsmith,
that might be the reason that you leave home.
That's
because
true.
there's nobody there that can actually teach you that skill, because they're all about the bows and the throwing items and the daggers.
Yeah.
I mean, I
Yeah.
don't know.
No, that makes sense. Then, among some of the other things, whips are kind of a leather working culture sort of item a lot of times, and I could imagine them being used to try to scare off large beasts and such just with the sound. So I could see whips being a part of their arsenal. Staves, definitely unarmed. Like drinking and fighting is part of their culture. I would imagine if you don't have some amount of unarmed skill after having lived there into your 20s, then you either were so beefy that nobody even wanted to attempt it, or you're sneaky enough that you're able to get out of all those situations.
Right.
And then malls, I guess I would see as well. I would imagine there might be some amount of things that, rocks that would need to break up in certain areas, being able to clear paths and stuff, but not necessarily as a weapon. I think it would probably be more just the industrial use of it. And cudgels, yeah, flails, probably not. Clubs. Of course they're using clubs. They're simple. There's a lot of wood in that area. Now, I can't remember. Do they have horses in that area? A lot of horsemanship and that sort of stuff, or is it more like work animals that you wouldn't necessarily ride? Like, don't they have it's reindeer up there, correct?
Yeah, and I see them as kind of in the mountains to some degree. More too much of a degree to really have horses the way I think of horses being used.
Yeah, I mean, again, this goes kind of back to the idea of either people of a certain status or people of a certain profession that maybe you would have a few, scouts that just kind of check out the surrounding area, make sure there's no like bandits forming up in areas that might be dangerous for the people of the area. I could see maybe some amount of light cavalry type guards or military. It wouldn't really be a large unit, but it would be, something that can go up and down the roads in short order should there be a need for them. But otherwise, I don't imagine the roads are really designed for horses. So if the horses are on the road, then people are, probably not really too happy about seeing them, those things getting in the way and pooping all over and stuff. So, definitely seems like limited use of horses or animals that you would be riding. So then with that, I don't really think mixed unit tactics would be too much of their sort of thing. Short bow, long bow, definitely. Sling, I could see hunting birds and stuff like that. Spears, I could see throwing spears and using them again for hunting. Crossbows, though, that's a little too much metal and mechanics. Do we think? Do you think?
I think crossbows would be something that would have been an influx of reacting to other cultures. I don't think it would be something that the Falkirk devised themselves, but
Yeah,
I'm
I
sure
agree
some
with
of
that.
them would purchase them from, they've interacted with other people for what, 60 years, 80 years. So yeah, I think
yeah,
some people would be like, yeah, this is like again, sorry, Westworld is on my mind because it just ended last week, but Hector and now I forgot, Armistice got their hands on contemporary machine guns, and were like, ooh, this is much better than my shotgun. I imagine you have people like that there who are like, yeah, this crossbow is pretty effective. I'll go ahead and use this.
there's that, but I would imagine there's just as many people that's like, wait, I can fire one very powerful bolt, and then it takes me how long before I can fire another? Oh, no, 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 no. I can squeeze off 10 arrows in the time it takes to reload that once.
Exactly.
And with my longbow and my training with it, I can, you know, make those shots count. So I'd
Well,
imagine,
especially in a forested kind of environment, you're going to want to be quick with the bow.
yeah,
Um,
a short bow
and
too, so it's not getting snagged on things.
right. I mean, it's a different kind of I don't know. I just, from the way that I look at it, it's a different kind of thing. Stealth is important
Hmm.
because maybe you're tracking and hunting, and it's just really straightforward for how we live up here.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. I guess kind of the one other thing, the manufacture of crossbows also doesn't seem like the sort of thing that they would want to expend metal on in general. So, just from a
No,
resource
but they might
factor,
find a market in supplying the parts,
I
like
could
the
see
sinew
that.
for the string,
Yeah, I could
the wood
definitely
for
see
the
that.
bows. I could see that.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. But then that's again going to be getting more into their trade with their neighbors down the road there. So it works out for both of them really well, I would imagine. But I don't really see crossbows being anything that just would get used there hardly at all. Just even having access and being able to get it repaired and all of that stuff, being able to. It's not that it would be hard to make bolts that are specifically designed for that crossbow. I just don't think people making arrows would really, care to do it. It's like, all right, I sit around and make 1,000 arrows a day. You want me to make them a little bit shorter and these different, configurations? Not really. I'm gonna keep on doing the thing that everybody actually uses here.
Right.
Um, Tide's End, though, definitely. Ballistas are a big thing there, so the smaller hand version I could definitely see, especially, if you've got a small ship that you make passes and you're trying to kill the crew on the other side. I could see crossbows being useful for that.
I think that I think there's probably somebody who's around in Fall Creek who can repair a crossbow,
Oh, I'm sure
among
there's.
other things. But if your party comes in wanting, they come out from adventuring and they want to be equipped. Everybody wants to be equipped with new crossbows. They'll probably have to wait a while to
Yeah.
have that order filled, I would imagine.
Yeah, that makes sense. So kind of looking at some of the other things, I other than actual military stuff, I really don't see them being much of a shield using culture. They seem like big burly two handed weapon using people, to be honest. So yeah, probably not too much with the shields. Maybe again, if you're a sword user and you're one of the rare few,
I don't
maybe you've
know.
gotten a bit of training
If
with
you're
it.
if you're going up against arrows, I can see you having an axe in one hand and a shield in the other.
That's true, but I wonder how many times it actually comes down to, people using just one. I would imagine, again, you would probably have an axe and a short bow, so if somebody's firing arrows, you'd find cover and return fire.
But it seems like the Falkirk did not. Was it the Falkirk that Umbul was saying doesn't have a lot of supposedly doesn't have a lot of history of battles. I think Verde was talking about
Yeah, because there's the bramble
armor.
wall that's encapsulating them, so they're mostly protected. There's kind of this natural in out area that I'm sure they've got guarded to some extent, but other than that, that wall of brambles and the containment that it creates really does a good job of protecting the area. I would imagine it would be bandits trying to infiltrate within that area and set up shop where you would end up seeing some sort of small to medium scale battle relative to that area. But other than that, no, you're right. They probably don't have a lot of wars because they're not very convenient to go to war with.
Yeah, I don't know that that says as much about not having battles as Ombwa seemed to think would be the case
Well,
because it's human nature to fight with various tribes and all of that stuff. Uh, Full scale war. I mean, in terms of there are reasons to have armor besides full scale war. So
right,
um, I can
but
imagine again shield and axe for some people, but you know.
that's true.
Well, and
Um,
you've got, people also, as human beings being different, players also are different. You've got players, and just like people who would prefer to be ranged, and you have others who would prefer to be melee. So you might have Diggs described, the guy with a buckler in one hand and an axe in the other, or a dagger or something. You might have someone dual wielding daggers, and you might have a bunch of folks who just do ranged with maybe a small dagger for any up close thing, but they prefer to be at range. Yeah. So I mean, all of those things would be part of, I would think, would be part of the culture.
Yeah, that's true. So I mean, now looking down a little bit further at some of the, well, actually, before we get to the craft skills, just kind of looking at magic. What sort of things? Will we see necromancy? No. Abjuration?
Why not? Why not?
Why wouldn't we say necromancy there? Definitely doesn't seem like the sort of thing that we would see in that culture. Nothing related to meddling with death really seems like. If there was like a plant necromancy or something, trying to, keep certain plants alive or bring back things, like if the seeds went bad or something, to be able to somehow make it grow anyway, that's more the sort of thing. But like flesh related necromancy and spirits and that sort of stuff, it doesn't seem like the sort of thing that would have persisted in their culture over the amount of time that the culture kind of developed into what it is. And even though their pantheon might not be the same as the one that you would see in Skypass, I think the general rejection of necromancy is probably still a major factor there too.
Well, and especially in a culture that reveres Dema, which is life, I think necromancy would at least make you an outlier.
But it's got anime, as you guys say, as one of the gods for necromancy. So why?
I don't know.
But I mean, in the Felkirk culture, it's Dema.
Okay.
Is the primary,
right.
And everybody knows about anime as the god of life and death. But I mean, the emphasis is, at least from my understanding, is on Dema and all of her interests, which are mostly life-related, life-giving related. So I just like human beings, somebody could grow up and be born in Fall Creek and have an interest in necromancy, but I don't know that they would get much support, if anything at all, there. They'd have to leave home and go find that, I think.
Yeah.
Good answer. That's a good answer.
And then abjuration, any thoughts from either of you on that one?
Looks, I doubt it, because it's outer and old ones, so I would expect people to...
Right.
I actually did a little bit of a search on Dema and the things that she is one of the gods associated with that skill. And it was kind of interesting because it was things that I didn't exactly expect. Like, I thought Dema might be a god of a ranged skill, and she's not. But if you do a find on that spreadsheet, there are a couple of things where she is part of the Trinity or by herself. One of them is healing, which is further down the list.
Mm-hmm.
Some crafting skills, herbology.
Yep. Farming.
Right.
Animal husbandry. Yeah, there's definitely a lot of skills that would be associated with Dema. So if we're looking at it from that perspective, yeah, that definitely opens.
Well, there's
up.
actually only 8, which I thought was a small number, considering how many skills there are in this list. That she's only mentioned 8 times, I thought was kind of notable, because that's fewer than I expected. She is the sole god associated with spinning, for example.
Okay.
Well, I don't know. I thought it was kind of interesting that there was only 8.
Yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
But it's, I mean, it would probably be exhaustive to have to list every single one that they're associated with. I mean, it makes sense to me to have. I mean, who has the most? Do you know?
I haven't gone there yet.
That's a good question.
I have to do it by hand because I can't download and filter the spreadsheet. So I'm doing it by hand.
I mean, I would 8 seems like a lot when I'm thinking about the domains of a particular god. Not to say that they don't have their hand in, 20 or 30, but just as a person trying to wrap your mind around these things, it's easier to say, oh, they're most known for these
Right,
five.
I agree. But I also wonder if, and this is a question for the devs, if Deno is her consort, and so as a pair they are this thing.
Mm-hmm.
Then I would have expected maybe Deno to be a part of some of the other combat skills that we might see with ranged,
Maybe.
and there's not.
Maybe
But
he's not
Deno
into...
is definitely mentioned more with some of the other, especially crafting skills.
Maybe he's not into combat.
Well, it kind of looks
Like
like he
some people.
is. He's the hammer of winter. So
That
hammers.
doesn't mean you're hammering people.
No, I know, but I mean, hammers seem to be a thing for Deno.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean that you're going to use them for combat. Not personally.
I know. It's all possible.
Yeah, I'm just saying. I don't know.
So yeah,
Unless you build a city where there's not supposed to be a city.
so yeah, definitely we were talking about healing. We went over some of the skills there, and there's a lot of stuff, not just things that are related to demo, but just things that you would imagine would be pretty common in the area: herbology, animal lore, butchering, skinning. Not so much archaeology, and I probably wouldn't expect as much Well, no, I take that back. They would be huge in symbology because of all the totems they make. That would be
Yep.
a very big thing for them.
Yep.
And that would kind of tie in with lore, I think, to some extent. Mineralogy and mining, I would imagine they're strong, but they're niche there. That if you're into that sort of thing, if that's the profession, there's a small mining and mineralogy core in the area that hits things up around the mountain and towards the base, but that it isn't the majority. It is maybe 5 to 10% of the work and infrastructure would be related. Maybe probably 5% even of the work and infrastructure related to Fall Creek would have to do with mining and mineralogy. Woodsmanship, though, that's a vast majority of what they're doing there. Farming, like they said, it's the reindeer. You just go out and milk them. You're not like you don't own the reindeer necessarily. You maybe have a couple of them, but you just go out and get that milk. So farming maybe not as much. Husbandry, yeah, like we were saying, Demascale. Fishing. Do they have a lake there? At the very top, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
I thought they did, yeah.
Yeah, so then fishing definitely makes sense there. Harvesting, absolutely. Gossip, yeah, I would imagine a lot of local gossip, knowing about the who's who and what's going on, but not gossip is in terms of like large scale political things that affect the entire world or affect the entire known area there. More that it's just knowing about the drama that's going on between people in town, which could have its own usefulness and other things, like if you're some sort of detective there. Scouting and recruiting, definitely could see there being some interest there, though I would imagine scouting and recruiting would actually be something where people come there to do. I would imagine Marafar and D&I probably get some of their best loggers from the Fell Creek. So maybe
I'm gonna just
What you got?
break in real quick here to say, maybe let's finish this up with Fell Creek and then maybe do Valor. I'm just looking at the time,
yeah, we can do that.
so that we don't spend the whole time just on one. Maybe we can squeeze in one more culture as well. But keep going. I'm
Sounds
just throwing
good.
that as a suggestion.
Yeah. and again with the knowing of other people's drama and things going on and listening for someone insulting your name in the bar so you can start a fight with them. Eavesdropping I could see a bit. Scavenging, not other than trying to find like herbs and roots and mushrooms and stuff like that. But I would imagine that gets a little bit more again into herbology than just straight up scavenging. I don't think you're like looking through wrecks and piles and ruins and stuff. And salvaging, though, I would definitely see a lot of that. It's just broken. You can still use, this, and this part of it. No big deal. Blacksmithing, again, like the mining and mineralogy, it would be strong but very niche. You can get stuff done, but it's going to take a while, and it might be kind of expensive.
So I guess of the list that you've gone through so far, what do you think are the top 5 things that you've listed so far for Fall Creek?
Regarding craft skills or just in general?
No, just out of all the things that you've read so far, what do you think are the 5 that would be biggest among Fall Creek, just so we could get a picture of them as a culture?
Probably woodsmanship, herbology. I think healing would be kind of the big thing there among the use of magic. I'm gonna say both short and longbow there, and really like almost the entire ranged weapon category, short of crossbows.
And there's 5.
Yeah.
I mean, I would have added a couple other things to that as being probably pretty primary.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Carving wood and bone
Right.
in the subcategory called marking, inscribing and embossing cloth and leather. I would have included that.
Probably symbology and we got to get the totem stuff in there somehow.
Right, totems and relics. So yeah, I mean, but again, like any culture, you're going to have the religious aspect, you have the social aspect, you have the working aspect. So each of those elements of culture might have its top 3 things that they do. And that's a lot more than 5. But I think that's a good question, actually, to really get it down to bullet points. If we were talking about a culture, a single culture, what would be those top 5 things? Is like, wow, that's really distilling it.
Okay, you can keep going. I was just trying to get a picture.
Yeah, I get you.
I'm losing it as we get to they would do this and not this. I'm kind of losing a little bit of that, but okay.
Yeah,
go ahead.
I mean, making weapons and armor to an extent, bows definitely, tailoring yes, leathercraft yes, logging oh you betcha, cooking I'm sure they've got a lot of really good cooking there too. Cartography, I don't think they actually need to make that much in the way of maps. I would imagine they probably do a lot more of their acquiring of maps through trade. Same with pages, books. I don't know if they.
No.
But since they don't really do much of a written language, so books.
So no, cartography, pagecraft, bookbinding.
Yeah, those
is well.
Not that they wouldn't, but it's another niche sort of thing.
No. So pagecraft and bookbinding would be out. That's primarily Brog and was pretty adamant about that not being a part of Fall Creek. Cartography, I'm kind of being nitpicky about because I don't think they make maps necessarily, but I don't think that they draw maps and rely on maps, but I think they do probably have some form of
training,
compass or something of. I think there's other ways to get that kind of knowledge across besides just creating.
I think the one that I'm surprised is not in the list is storytelling, because I would have expected that for the Falkirk people, an oral tradition. It should have storytelling or something like that, and I haven't found it yet.
Yeah, that could fall under lore.
Mm-hmm.
But we have to learn how they, because I think that they
Oh,
definitely pass
speechcraft.
down their lore.
It would probably be lore and
Um,
speechcraft combined.
Oh,
but it
okay.
could
There we
be.
go.
Do they have? Is that one of the things that they
Yep,
have?
122.
Or no, no, no. I meant is that it's performance. See, Brog, Sneed.
Well, that
Uh,
could.
but
Mm,
all I'm saying is that it might not be speechcraft. It could be dance. It could be through their totems. It could be other things besides books or speech. How they do
okay.
their
So the
Right.
lore.
guys have confirmed that storytelling is an application of speechcraft because in an oral tradition, you not only have speechcraft, and that's usually some very specific karma that somebody has got the entire history and they've got it memorized, but you also have mnemonics. I mean, you just have this huge history to memorize and tell the story of for the next guy to pick it up. I mean,
But
just
all I'm saying is it could be it. It could be music. It could be right instead of the storytelling could be through a variety of other means besides the
Right.
speech. And
right.
I'm not saying that that's something to think about. Is all I'm saying. But anyway, keep going.
All right, let me get back up
I
to
think
where
we're
we were
just
there.
gonna focus on Fall Creek this time, and
Yeah.
we should do episodes of this is going to be skills for Valor, this is going to be skills for, but we can separate that throughout next year. That's that. I
Yeah,
think
and
that's a
I was gonna say that's probably gonna come up a lot in the actual play sessions with the devs. So that might be something that kind of gets rolled into some of those episodes too. Is just the discussions and considerations for what going into that culture's area and what to expect and what you're going to be seeing a lot of and having to look out for if you're trying to find.
Yeah,
Uh,
there's some places in this spreadsheet that are yet unfinished. So
right.
hopefully we can get that completed and then we'll have a really fleshed out um, document to work with here. I'd love to be
Yep.
able to sort it different way, but
We're
um,
going to need to sort it in a variety of ways, and I'm going to
right.
mention that at the end of the show. I have an idea for another topic, but go ahead.
Okay. So brewing and distilling, definitely see that being things that maybe not as much the distilling, but definitely a lot of brewing. I could see it being, like back in ye old days where water was, the potable water that you drew and boiled and put some a little bit of malts or something. I guess they don't really have malts in the area, but it'd have to be something with some sugar to it, and then you throw the white slop from the last batch into the bottom of this batch, and it starts to get a little fizzy and a little bit of stuff forms at the top, and you've got very very mild beer that's potable and resists spoilage, and that's what everybody's drinking. I don't know if that's necessarily
Or
how they do it, but I would imagine that that could have potentially been one of the things that they had to establish just coming out of the cataclysmic events that had happened, and something that they needed to do before I guess the water maybe even cleaned up itself, or even that water source became more readily available for them.
or maybe they smoke instead of drink.
Right.
Yeah. No, we know that they drink because they have bars and they get drunk and they fight and they have drunken brawls. So, yeah, alcohol is definitely part of their culture. There's no
Okay.
denying that. They could smoke too. I definitely don't disagree with you there, and they probably have some good smoke. Um,
I see brewing and is it brewing and distilling?
yeah,
It's
that's the
Sirith and Brog. So
Well,
are they doing that more through Sirith than through Brog? Where are they? Where did? How did that come into their culture?
well, it doesn't necessarily have to do with the gods so much as resources and availability and things they took
right.
interest in. Certain
They
gods
could have
might have
discovered
more.
some
Yeah,
alcoholic beverage by accident just by mixing herbs.
yeah. I mean, it's one of those things that around the world, different cultures found to use very very light small beer sort of thing as your potable water. So
Yeah,
it isn't for a very outdoorsy rustic sort of culture like this. I would imagine it being. Uh,
yeah, but I'm saying there's a whole bunch of people in North America who did not,
no,
right?
that's true. but there were ones that did too.
I'm just saying.
Like the fermented corn beverages and stuff they had in Mexico and stuff. So yeah.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, were the bars there when uh, the Brog people from Sky Pass came and found them, or did the bars come up
They
afterwards?
probably came up after.
That's
But
a good point.
like Snipe said, brewing is one of those survival skills that gets humanity through hard times. I'd imagine it was a skill that carried through the fall.
Wait, I can't let that go. It gets
Okay.
certain groups of humanity, and again, there are other groups who don't use it, and they still get through the times, right?
Sure.
Some people do, and some people don't. So it's not like, ubiquitous across all of humanity. There's recreation and all kinds of forms of recreation, but let's not pretend that, everybody does this. It's so important for all the cultures, because there's tons of cultures for whom brewing was
Right.
not a thing. That's all I'm saying.
Right. Fermentation, yeah. That's not necessarily like, brewing full on beer like we know today, but more like I was saying, that it's just a little bit of sweet put in a little bit of water, maybe a little bit of herbs to help resist mold and that sort of stuff. And, like I said, the white slop from the last time, or if you're doing the fermented corn beverage, basically you just take a bunch of corn, put it in your mouth, chew it up, spit it in the bucket, keep on doing that until there's enough to let it ferment and turn it into booze.
There was an anime I just watched a couple of months ago where they did that with rice. It was the priestess.
Yeah,
It
I
was
could
a
see
rice
that.
thing where they
Yeah.
would chew up the rice and spit it in the thing and then let it ferment for.
Yeah.
Ugh.
I can dig it. It's legit. There's cultures that do that. Carpentry, masonry. Carpentry, I could definitely see major part of their. I mean, sure, they build really nice houses out of wood, and do really not elaborate exterior design like Victorian sort of stuff, but elaborate architectural design to make the most use out of wood and the least need for metal as possible, to make the most structurally stable things that can resist the elements. I would imagine potentially wind, definitely rain, definitely snow. So, that's a lot to have to be able to deal with, and I would imagine they've gotten pretty damn good at it. Plus, they probably use some pretty sturdy wood for it. Masonry, maybe making the foundations for those houses, but I don't really see them making a lot of brick walls and, doing a lot. The biggest thing I would see them doing with stone is making, special statue, totem, idol sort of things. A totem made out of stone would be something that would be, incredibly rare and special, I would imagine. And for a very specific purpose. Spinning definitely makes sense. Smelting, jeweler, again, gets into that 5% niche I was talking about, where they have people that do it and they're good at it, but there's not a lot of them. Mask making, for some reason, I imagine they use a lot of masks in their cultural events. I could even see it be something that storytellers use, that they have a bunch of masks that, when they're representing a character rather than just narrating, they hold up the mask. Maybe it isn't in their face, in front of their face, but that sort of thing's part of the symbology.
That's super huge speculation there. So I would love to, at some point, get some dev info on who exactly is focused on mask making and how it's used and why. I mean, sure, it could be.
I mean, there's.
But I don't get the impression. I haven't gotten that impression yet from the devs.
Yeah, I know we've talked about masks a lot more in the context of Crown's Rock and, people having masquerades and stuff like that. But I would imagine tribal and cultural purposes definitely make sense. Like that a lot. Dolls mask for storytelling, that's rad. All right. Well, we might have made it a thing just here and now.
Well, it's got to be a thing for somebody. I just don't know for whom it is. So if it's Fall Creek, that's fine. I've kind of been waiting to hear.
Yeah. Or I could imagine somewhere in Kalasha, one of the cultures there, using it for more, cultural and non-entertainment purposes too.
There's a lot of that could. We
Yep.
just have to hear who are.
Yeah.
So,
Valor makes
He already
masks.
says he knows
All right.
Valor makes masks.
Good to know. Um, ceramics. Yeah, I don't know about them in ceramics. Honestly, I would imagine they do a lot more with wood and stone than they would with pulverized baked stone that's been shaped in a certain way. Maybe I'm mistaken. Seems like ceramics is something that would probably provide materials for and send them down the river with the logs for you know other trade and stuff. But for some reason, I don't imagine they make a lot of ceramics of their own.
yeah.
And likewise, I doubt that they do too much with glass. I mean, they probably make their windows, but if they make
You
glass
need a
windows,
certain amount of dedicated heat to do some of that stuff.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's the thing. Maybe some types of glass they can do a little
Well,
bit with, but
I don't think it's worth
yeah,
laboring over. That's not the
it
place.
that would have to be something
Yeah,
they
it's
trade
glass.
for, I bet. But yeah, like we were saying, engraving, inscribing, embossing, carving. Maybe not as much engraving because they don't do as much with metal. They probably know how to do
Yeah.
it, but it's a factor of their skills with inscribing, embossing, and carving. That's like, well, I know how to do those well enough. I can etch something cool into a piece of metal. Um, but yeah, definitely inscribing, embossing, carving. Those huge things. I would imagine carving is a major ritual, cultural sort of thing. And if you're one of the people that makes the totems, you're probably at a skill level of 7 or 8 with that before you're actually making the like official totems that are going to be around for a while. It's I'm sure a very high level of skill for the ones that they're going to use for major cultural records and such. Locksmithing, I don't see them as much of a culture that has locks so much as, well, if you're inside and you don't want people in, bar the door.
Yeah.
Otherwise, doors
Uh-huh.
open.
Yeah.
Trap making, maybe for hunting small game, but definitely not making elaborate Wile E. Coyote contraptions. Just like a rope and some tension on a tree or whatever, and the thing grabs it, and the rope triggers and breaks its poor little neck or whatever, and you just come back and eat it sometime. I could see those sorts of traps, or a box with a stick under it, propping it up. But I don't imagine they're making really elaborate traps. Um,
I was just thinking, Omba just posted, they weave fish traps in deadfalls. I could
ah,
definitely see traps for fishing, though.
that makes sense. That makes sense. Um, Alchemy, nah. Don't expect it there. And
Brewing, but not alchemy. Okay.
yeah, I wouldn't imagine a lot of alchemy because it's alchemy is the magical application. So the only amount of alchemy I would imagine seeing is really creating health potions using the healing magic in conjunction with elements of brewing to create you know brews that, yeah, it gets you drunk and it heals you, 2 for 1.
Yeah, I bet it's probably more herbology than alchemy, but
Right, right. It's just, oh yeah, no, these herbs just make you numb if you crush them up and drink them. So we put them in your
yeah,
beer.
yeah,
Magic healing potion. Imbuing, not so much. Totems and relics, definitely. That's their thing. So yeah, spellcraft, tapping. I don't see as much of that being part of their culture. Um, what is that? Caravaneering?
yeah.
Um, no, they send things down the river. They probably don't caravan that much, so probably not. But they do business. I would imagine negotiation. I can't imagine a culture that doesn't have negotiation, though. That's kind of the
Right.
thing. Like,
Right.
if you've got a culture that doesn't have
Right, but it's not
negotiation,
so
you're
much
getting
that,
stepped on.
yeah, but it's not so much whether the culture has it, it's how big it is, and how where in the hierarchy of value it is. I think,
Right.
right?
I would
So,
imagine that would be more of like a leadership sort of skill in the area, but not something that the common person has to deal with much. Um, and just like everywhere else in the world, I'm sure there's some sneaky little brat that learned to pickpocket people, but um, it's not like Crown's Rock, where I would imagine, it's like depictions of New York from the 80s and 90s, where you see the character walking through a bus, somebody bumps into them, and oh, your wallet's gone. I don't imagine, everybody's holding on to their valuables in.
do they even have pockets?
Yeah, I'm sure they've got utility pouches and things that they wear to help them carry things that they find, or
Maybe.
trail mix and their water horn or whatever to help them get through the day. Lock picking, no. No, we've been over that. Disable device, again, they don't have elaborate traps, so I don't think they would really need to deal with disarming elaborate traps. Sneaking, though, yes, like we were talking about with hunting, being out with a short bow and a dagger, trying to take down some sort of animal, that's a big deal.
What is the relationship with Deno to disable device and sneaking, do you think?
That's a good question. Paul, do you have any insight on that one? Paul?
Huh.
Polaris?
Well,
Oh, there you are. I thought you disconnected or something.
no, I'm going back and forth on the spreadsheet.
I gotcha.
That is kind of interesting, isn't it?
Okay.
I guess I see them as a denial sort of thing, that you're preventing someone from knowing about your position, or preventing someone from taking advantage by using some sort of a device.
So you're saying used almost exclusively defensively?
Yeah.
That'd be interesting.
I mean,
does work with some of the defensive stuff.
yeah. So that would definitely make sense to me. Is more that you're denying and preventing, because that kind of goes along with the theme of, when the hammer of winter strikes, everything sucks. You better have stocked up ahead of time, because all the things you wanted to do and could be doing have just been taken away from you for a little while. So, I could see that being kind of the relation there. The gods don't care about intent. Okay. Sneaking, he's not necessarily interested or disinterested. Disable device, he'd be interested, but not like sneak. Okay. People can smash locks. They use their crafting skill. Ah, I gotcha. Bluffing. That, it seems like an interpersonal
Well,
skill that people would have developed because they're scandalous, but I would imagine there's just a few people that would be doing that, or otherwise people that are trying to seem bigger or better than they are. So it's like, oh, I've done this and that and the other, and then getting called out on it, and having to bluff your way through. So that's the sort of thing I could see, maybe a bit of bluffing, but I wouldn't imagine like a business application of bluffing being part of what they do.
so hold on. I just wanted to be clear. So disable device is about and Deno is about the crafting aspect of it being a device and things related to a device.
I think so.
Yeah. Okay.
Trap find, I would imagine they would have a bit of that, just so that way if they they know that they've been setting traps around, or actually trap find, I would imagine just nature has its own natural snags and hazards and pitfalls, so maybe it's looking for poison ivy or stinging nettles while you're, out on the hunt rather than
If
looking
there are
for
people
tiger traps or something.
if there are people setting traps, people need to know how to find the traps. You don't want
That's
to just be
true.
walking around stepping in the random traps.
That's
So
true, but I would imagine there's areas where they've culturally determined like this part of these woods are okay to set traps, but around this area don't do it. That's where the kids play around. That's where we pick the fruit. We don't want people stepping in traps
what I'm
there.
saying, if you've got people who are setting traps, you have to have people who are
Yeah,
finding the traps too,
that's
because
true.
you're not
Um,
going to go out hunting for stuff and not knowing how to avoid stepping into a trap.
yeah. What kind of masks? I see this discussion going on here. Colossians would definitely make their own style of masks, I would imagine. Um,
Oh, haha, McWalmy's in. That's funny. Okay.
do the mask
Oh
fit
yeah,
culturally, maybe
interesting.
for fun, but not for ritual. Okay. Okay, good to know. Well, wait, didn't they have a lot of the animal gods up in Colosia?
Yep.
So then
The
I would
beast-headed
imagine,
gods.
yeah, that's the mask that they would use,
Yep.
for or at least for cultural things, not just for entertainment.
Among others, but
Yeah,
would expect people to want to appear like those gods.
yeah, for whatever cultural and ritual sort of
Hmm.
things. That makes sense.
All manner. Yep.
Even burial masks and stuff I could see being done like that, like ancient pharaohs and stuff.
Even sex.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So that's more of a Crowns Rock thing, I think.
Why?
Because Crowns Rock is a scandalous area.
Oh, it's scandalous. I mean, we're comparing Fall Creek to Sky Pass. It might be scandalous in Sky Pass.
Well, that's true. Um,
And of course, collage is going to seem decadent to Sky Pass people, and probably some of the Congarai folk too.
hmm, it is a Crowns Rock thing. Ha! Called it. All right, continuing down the list here. Gesture, secret languages. I'm not really sure about that. If either of you can think of something either way, it's under the thieving subcategory, so it doesn't really seem like the sort of thing that they would need to be using as much. I would imagine maybe gestures for hunting, like if you're trying to stay quiet and signal for, position and targeting and that sort of stuff. Maybe gesture for that, but I wouldn't imagine it being something that anybody is having to train into, more than 5 points total to be able to have a mastery of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think again, it's who are we? Who is the point of view that Theleston is being told through? Because um, you know, it's often the case that uh, one culture assumes that something is lacking because it's not like theirs. Come to find out that other cultures have the same thing. It's just not presented in the same manner. So there could be gestures and languages and storytelling and knowledge and lore that's quite robust that somebody from another culture doesn't recognize because it's
Right.
not told in the same framework. So
Yeah.
possibly, yeah.
I gotta
Uh,
say the
Not
next.
just for gesture, but especially secret languages could come in a lot
Yeah.
of forms.
Yeah, that's true.
Totems being, a thing. But
Yeah. So I kind of think the next 8 skills all would appear there. Tracking definitely because they're hunters. Awareness definitely. These are these for tracking, awareness, survivalism, and animal training. Those are all under ranging, and that definitely seems like they're sort of stuff to learn and know about. Intimidate. I would imagine there's a lot of that goes on in the drunken bars before the fights occur. Um, Oh, whispering is also under ranging, and like I was saying with gesture secret language, the ability to communicate in such a way that you can convey the information you need to without notifying whatever it is you're trying to hunt about your position is a very important thing to do. So whispering I can see being a big part of stuff. Musicianship, dancing, definitely. If it's a culture with oral tradition, there's definitely a high possibility that a lot of those stories and songs and rituals are done to a beat or to a dance or to a combination of the two, or that part of the traditional telling of it is that there's a beat that goes along with it and people interpretively dancing or something. So I would imagine that for sure.
So I have a question. Which culture do you think does not have dancing? Maybe even at all?
Sky Pass. Sky Pass. Bunch of stodgy broggings, and it's like, oh, don't move your feet in that way.
The monks
scuff
might
the
not
rocks.
dance, but the people that live there dance.
How do we know?
I don't know.
I mean, the whole place can't be dour, right?
Why not?
I mean, why?
Dancing is often an expression of just being alive.
Mormons don't dance, right? They're not supposed to dance. That's the
Really?
Well, not
Baptist,
supposed to is not the same as don't
Baptist,
do it.
No, it is. Baptists and Mormons, you're not supposed to dance.
Well, I'm sticking with Sky Pass on this one.
Oh. That's what popped in my mind. But anyway, go ahead. I hadn't thought about that before, but just looking at skill and thinking through cultures, I mean, I just, again, wonder about that. I religiously listen to Mormon podcasts, so I learn a lot about stuff that I didn't know previous.
Good one, Verde. Sky Pass has line dancing.
I like it.
Yeah. Persuasion, yes. Not as much in business application, but I could imagine trying to get a crew of people together for some big game hunt or logging expedition, or I would imagine there's a lot of group activities that you want to try to get your buddies together, and part of using that persuasion skill is going to be the leadership side of it, where you're not only convincing them that they want to join with this, but that you're going to be the one leading it. So you get the glory and the credit when the oral history of this great event gets retold later down the line. So I could see some of that, not necessarily for business, more for just cultural and even honor-related purposes.
Yeah, I'm expecting that we're gonna wrap up in another 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, then getting down one more from there, seduction, not something that you probably need in everyday life. Again, I go back to Crown's Rock being a place where I'd imagine that's a little bit more commonplace.
Well, but remember,
I mean, in terms of performance, as a performance skill, as a person portraying a character who is seductive, there could be a lot of places with that. I don't imagine those sorts of, plays and operas and stage performances and stuff go on very much up at the top of the mountain there. So I would imagine it's less used in that culture.
Yeah, I would think. I think of Valor more when I think of seduction as a skill that would be a cultural thing. But
Yeah. Speechcraft, though, like we talked about, that's where the storytelling and the ability to, learn and recite and perform oral history and tradition is kind of rooted in. So that's a skill that a lot of people probably have to varying degrees, but there's going to be some people, like multiple people, that have a 10 in that skill just among the locals, I would imagine. I've got a lot of stories to tell. Um, Sex, I just imagine them having the most like plain ho hum, like, oh, gonna put it in. All right, well, see you tomorrow. Not like getting really really exciting with it. That it, you know, they're stinky loggers. They want to get it done and then be done with it.
Depends. Again, you might, if you've got masks and you've got carved totems. I mean, you know,
Yeah, well, we'll leave that one up to the devs, I think. But I just don't imagine it's the sexiest place. Um, unless you're.
depends on what you think of.
Well,
What your imagination, you know.
um,
People are people.
and then with speechcraft, I would imagine there is acting to some extent, and they say examples, performance and disguise. That would make sense if there's a oral tradition that is told once every year, and it's like a big cultural event. I would imagine the people that are doing the dancing and the people that are doing the percussion and the music alongside it are probably also at least in some sort of costumes, and maybe have some coordinated things that certain parts of the story they all raise their hands and like clap their hands together, or bang their sticks together or whatever, and it being part of this cultural storytelling event. So yeah, I would imagine there is some of that, but not as somebody who's gonna go to the Theleston equivalent of Hollywood as their next step, so much as it being just something they do for fun and for cultural events. And I bet they probably make some really kick-ass disguises and costumes and stuff. Like I bet they make some awesome things with reindeer antlers and feathers and stuff like that. Some
sure.
really elaborate stuff. And with the leathers and stuff and dyed fabrics, they probably have some really cool looking things. If you're there during one of their cultural events and you've never been there before, probably be completely blown away.
Didn't they have some kind of logging festival? Was that mentioned?
I don't know.
I think so.
Yeah, 'cause they had a what's the toss? The caber toss?
Oh
Didn't they have a
yeah,
caber
yeah,
toss
that's right.
festival?
That would make sense. Yeah, my brother was telling me about this bodybuilder guy who actually, as a kid, he would chop down a tree, then pick it up, and if he could pick it up, he would try to find the next biggest tree, chop it down, and pick it up. And that guy can squat like 700 pounds. So, I would imagine that's the sort of pastimes and stuff that they would do there too, a little bit. Symbology, like we talked about earlier, with the high emphasis on totems, yes, 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 yes. Symbology is a huge thing for them. Identification, I don't really know. Like, are we talking about identifying relics, or are we talking about identifying stuff from specific cultures? Um, for
It's
their
under
extent,
scholarship, so it could be a
yeah,
variety.
to their
So
extent, I would imagine it's just a very innate, intuitive sort of thing. Either it's a Falkirk sort of thing, or not a Falkirk sort of thing, and that's probably the majority of the extent that they care about it. Uh, Spirit talking, I could see being something that they do. Um, I could even see that being part of one of the oral tradition and like cultural things is actually going beyond speechcraft into the realm of spirit talking when doing one of these rituals, and potentially it being something where you're asking for answers from beyond, from people that might know better but you don't have really access to anymore. um Deciphering ancient linguistic, or deciphering slash ancient linguistics, like I said, if it ain't Falkirk, they probably don't care, so probably not so much of that. um Appraising, probably not, like artifacts and jewelry and stuff like that, so much as appraising something for its sturdiness and how well it was crafted, and whether it's sturdy and stable and functional. That's probably, or for this would be more of a woodworking sort of skill, but being able to assess a nice piece of cured wood and determining, all right, this is good or not good for X, Y, or Z task. But I don't see appraising being a huge thing they have to deal with. Guild management, they don't really, they've got their neighborhoods, but they aren't really organized in any sort of guild, so that does not seem like it would be a thing there. Linguistics, again, if it ain't Falkirk, they probably don't care. So maybe there's one or two other languages that are known because they have a lot of trade with people that speak those languages, but otherwise I don't imagine them being very big in the linguistic side of thing. And then back into ranging here, a couple more of those skills popped up on the list. Climbing, swimming, yeah, I could see those being a thing. Climbing trees especially.
Climbing more and mountains.
Yeah, climbing mountains.
Climbing more than swimming, I think.
Yeah, swimming. Well, swimming I could see being part of.
They have to do, since they send stuff down river. So
yeah, well, part of it that, but part of it being potentially fishing related, potentially being one of those things that before you're actually allowed to fish, before you're given a fishing rod, you have to prove that you can swim because nobody gonna save you if you fall in on your own.
Yeah,
There
I can see that.
could be other things like swimming competitions, diving competitions. Maybe you've got a trap that goes all the way down and the rope got bit by something, so you can't pull it up anymore, so you got to have someone swim down and get it.
look up the Pool of Death if you haven't seen video of that.
Okay.
I think it's in Hawaii, but
Does it just kill you or something?
if you're in, you very likely people survive, but it's very interesting.
Acrobatics. I haven't really thought about acrobatics and juggling for them.
I can see juggling more than acrobatics.
Yeah, I
but
could see it being a pastime, just being able to, manage multiple things, maybe even as part of a workout routine, just juggling bigger and heavier things as a coordination exercise. But yeah, acrobatics, and then the other part of juggling would be like the Chinese yo-yo sort of thing, where it's the string with the two sticks and the spinner on it. Again, I don't see them doing that as much. That seems like more of a flashy culture sort of thing, something that you'd probably see in like Valor. Or, again, Crown's Rock, I'd imagine, has tons of jugglers and acrobats. For acrobatics, I would imagine maybe in the context of some of the performances and some of the actions you might have to do that go along with the oral traditions and the stories being told. But I don't see these rough and tumble people doing cartwheels and shoulder rolls and stuff like that very much.
Okay.
Conceal, again, if you're one of the more scandalous people and you're sneaky, or you're like the little kid that's been pickpocketing people, you probably know how to conceal. But otherwise, I would imagine they're more of a culture that's like, yeah, look at my axe, isn't it wonderful? It's
Well,
just hanging off the belt.
Unless you're hunting, stalking prey.
That's true, but I would imagine that's less concealing. When I think of concealing, it's keeping things away from view when you're in people's proximity, versus stealth is more making sure they don't even detect your proximity.
Yeah. Yeah, I think conceal is different than sneaking. So sneaking is right. That's what we had earlier, which I see them doing while they're scouting and hunting. Versus conceal is a little bit. I mean, that kind of thing would be more under sneaking and trap finding. I think.
Yeah. Escape, I don't see them doing that much. If you've done such a bad thing that you need to be restrained or something, I would imagine there's probably someone watching.
Valor is going to Fall Creek to get their
That's
slaves.
true. That's true. But is it something that everybody knows, or is it something that you'd specifically have to seek training for?
Apparently, you're supposed to know not to hang out with Valyri because they might
No,
they kind of prey on the people from Fall Creek. So you
I
need to
meant
know how to.
learning
So
the
this
escape
sounds like
skill.
something
Yeah.
they need to learn rather than something they know.
Right, right. Something that, maybe people who have had that experience and came back, come to teach.
Are yeah. So I think probably people know in a lot of different. But
Yeah.
I'm just yeah. Go ahead.
Fast draw, I maybe not as much for performance, honestly, as for hunting. Being able to keep that steady stream of arrows coming out if you need to. Being able to quickly draw your dagger if some small beast sneaks up on you, and that's all you got to fend yourself off with. It seems like something that has hunting application, but I don't I don't imagine they would use it much for performance. Mimicry, though, yes. Hunting things, making the sounds those things make, oh yes, definitely, definitely.
Especially as related to speechcraft
Mm-hmm.
and
Yep.
storytelling.
Oh yeah, I guess that even gets into voice acting a little bit when you combine that with
Yep.
speechcraft.
You need to speed run through these
Yeah,
last.
yeah, we'll
10,
we'll get to it
15.
here. We're almost done. Demolitions, no, they don't probably deal with that
Demolitions, no. Psychology.
much. Psychology, uh,
Under scholarship, I'd say no. There might be some other equivalent of that, but I'd say
the closest I would imagine
helps
with them
probably
is
not.
some sort of like, elder relationship counselor sort of person, but otherwise, like, probably not.
Well,
Um,
and that one's got an asterisk, which we don't know what that's
Yeah.
for. So.
yeah.
So, cultural etiquette is kind of a category of its own, it looks like here. Or it's maybe just not filled in properly. But a lot of this etiquette stuff, cultural, yes. Business, only if you're a trader. Political, I don't think they have much need for political etiquette. Their culture is organized in a way that you don't need much of it. Military etiquette, no, they don't really get in wars much. Nobody really wants to attack them. Religious etiquette, to the extent of being able to understand the totems and the rituals and that sort of stuff, I would imagine there's a bit of that, and people at least know why these totems are, there and conveying these messages, and why these specific stories that are being retold have significance. Medicine, yes, this is kind of getting back into healing being one of the big things associated with them. Medicine, I could see. I wouldn't call it battlefield medicine necessarily. That's the category for it. Field triage. Somebody just got stabbed by a reindeer, and you got to patch them up. I could see that being a skill that they have. For sure, you stepped in a trap or something. Veterinary, definitely. They like taking care of the nature. They like taking care of the reindeer and the animals that they, milk and stuff. So, veterinary makes sense. Naval engineering, nah. Maybe some guy knows how to make canoes, but otherwise, I don't expect them making boats. Driving, nah. Sketching and painting, yes, definitely with the totems. Not just inscribing the images into the totems, but then also applying the right kinds of paints, being able to make those paints so they'll last a while.
I see Fall Creek as not being. I think sketching and painting would be rare.
Well, again, it's in the context of the totems. Other than that, I don't think they're like painting murals so much. So it'd probably be making the
Yeah,
dyes and
I
the
don't know if
pigments
it's
that they put
skill.
on the totems. Improvised combat, hell yes. Oh yes. Oh yes. I'm sure people know how to fight very well with the tankard. Pathfinding and navigation, definitely. Those
I
are
would say
very.
pathfinding, yes. Navigation, no.
Oh wait,
Because
navigation
it's
in terms
maritime.
of boating stuff?
Right.
Yeah,
It's
no.
maritime,
Oh,
yeah.
definitely no. No, no, no.
I
They
mean-
would not. No. Pathfinding, yes, though. That's especially
They're
being
sending
able to.
logs down a river somehow.
They are, but I think the river's doing most of the work, and all they need to do is make sure that things don't get sideways and jammed up.
You still have to navigate. You actually have to navigate a river if you're sending stuff down it. But Yeah, you have to
Yeah,
know the pitfalls and all that stuff. It's not like you're pathfinding necessarily on water, but you have to navigate it.
right. Okay, I'll give you that. All right. Well, that
That
was a
was Fall
lot of
Creek
stuff to
skills.
cover there, and yeah, that's definitely each culture is an entire episode's worth of content. Just assessing what skills they would use in the culture. So I think that's one of the things I'm a little excited for when the source books start coming through. When they do the work for us.
So, speaking of source book, it seems to me like we are missing a column that I would like to see filled in, which is the culture column,
Ah,
because it
yes.
would be nice to have that in the same vein that we have the gods um, column, and it doesn't necessarily have to be exhaustive, but I would like to see that. Um, and so I think what we should do, an episode that I would like for us to theory forge about, is trying to sort um, skills by god and see, especially
Yeah.
like the outer
Right now, the
god.
way that the permissions are set up on this, we'll have to do it by hand.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah,
But specifically, I'd like to look at the outer gods and the great old ones and see what skills they seem to be, although he says not interested in, but connected to, and see if we can get some kind of view of, they're unfathomable, but based on how they're connected to skills, maybe we can get an idea of what types of activities tend to
yeah. I mean, there's some things that
draw them.
the magic categories isn't completely filled out with a sphere. We're missing
Oh, we're
gods
missing all
on a
kinds of stuff.
list, so we're
Yeah,
missing
yeah,
quite a lot.
yeah, yeah.
But yeah, I think the sphere of influence would be interesting for magic to see which things go where. You asked me earlier about how many had I searched for the count of gods and skills before, and I'd only done the one, but I did a count on Sneed,
Mm-hmm.
and Sneed is mentioned 20 times
Yeah.
versus Dema for 8. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that kind of listing would be interesting as well. I think that would help us also wrap our minds around um, what the gods are, how they're represented in this
Mm-hmm.
sense.
Mm-hmm.
I think that would make some interesting theory forging.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So we're into next year, is that right? The next episode is for a couple of reasons, but yeah.
Yeah,
And it's got to be New Year's would be the next one, right? That's exactly a week away from.
yeah.
So I don't know what we're doing. I think every other week and hope it's that, but it can be whatever. That sounds good.
Oh yeah. Mute bra. Yeah. So anyway, what I was saying is that yeah, there's a good chance that it'll be coming back on the 8th. People have holiday things they need to do, and the first probably isn't going to be the easiest day to get people for, especially people going to be celebrating and watching flowers on vehicles being driven down some nice part of Southern California, and various other things. So the 8th makes the most sense, and we're hoping that starting pretty soon, maybe the following week, instead of just talking about the game, we'll be playing it. So we'll definitely we'll be letting you folks know. I'm sure if you follow in the chat that Discord, especially if you're in the Patreon channel, then the the information will be there as soon as we know and as soon as we're all set on getting started with that. So definitely be on the lookout. I'm excited. It's going to be a fun new year of all things Theleston related. And yeah, it'll be pretty fun. So thank you all very much for coming. Paul, thanks again. I think the still image is going to be the thing. Diggs, good having you again. And of course, kudos to your camera for not cutting out this time. Or I guess that's your internet. And as you folks can see, I've got a new webcam. Yay! So, yeah, things are going good. Zero, of course, is doing his thing. I'm sure he'll
Slacking as usual.
Yeah, he. So we'll see more of him next year, and who knows? Maybe we'll start getting some more folks on here. We'll see. But that being said, we kind of went a little bit long here, and we're continuing to go long. So I'm gonna shut up now after saying, everybody have a good one, happy holidays, happy New Year, and see you in 2017 for the next episode. Cheers.